Cullen goes live in 5 minutes. Lynn Cullen goes live in 4 minutes. Lynn Cullen goes live in 3 minutes. Lynn Cullen goes live in 2 minutes. Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Well, good morning, and obviously it's not Lynn Cullen, but it's Tom Sokolowski sitting in for Lynn. I have to say, I know a number of people who are very, very loyal listeners were in the audience on Monday evening when Lynn gave her stellar one-night performance of Lynn Cullen's Wild Ride at the Pittsburgh Cabaret, which was a benefit for the Planned Parenthood organization, which Lynn is a strong supporter for. And we found out that the performance that evening garnered $20,000 for this wonderful organization. And Lynn, although, as some of you know, has been going through some difficult medical things after her surgery of about 3 weeks ago, was in fine form, and she was marvelous because she came out looking frail and wan with one of those nasty hospital gowns that we're all forced to wear that infantilize us, both us and the nurses as well, you know, like looking like 4-year-old children's pajamas. And she came out holding one of those rolling stands with a bag on it, as if she was on intravenous, and sort of said that she doesn't know if she was up for it, and then at one grand moment threw off the regalia, and there she was in her sparkling evening blouse and whatever, and gave a fabulous performance, which had a standing ovation. So thank you to Lynn, and I know it was filmed, so perhaps under the auspices of Planned Parenthood, they may be showing it at some time for those of you who missed it. But those of you who missed it, you missed a great opportunity. Well, I'm here today coming through the cold of this very unnaturally cold day in late November as we approach Thanksgiving. And I forgot, the newspaper came in yesterday, and there are all these things about light up night. And I remember, I'm old enough and have been in Pittsburgh for 17 years to remember when it first started, it was called Sparkle Season, which I thought was somehow more appropriate because it was so lunatic, you know. Come out, turn on your lights, and spend money. And that's what it's all about. I mean, unfortunately, last year's Light Up Night was less exorable, in my opinion, because the mayor's office had put together some money, and there were a series of 5 pop-up installations of art. And I must say, through full disclosure, I was somewhat involved in the committee that helped pick the artists. But it was wonderful. There were marvelous art installations and some little pop-up stores, one of which, a clothing store on 6th Street and another a bookshop, have remained permanently. So that's really nice. And then there were a couple of art installations. Some of you may remember, again, on 6th Street, the Robot Repair Shop, which was really wonderful. And that artist, Toby, I can't remember Toby's last name, I'm sorry, I think Toby Atticus, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and he's to be seen elsewhere around town. So would that there had been money this year to do that. So call up the mayor's office, the Department of Public Art, and say, we want more public art. Well, there are lots of things to talk about today, and I hope some of you call in. Lots of interesting things culturally, politically, etc. First, isn't it interesting that Dr. Huxtable wasn't what we thought he was? Nasty old jerk. I always remember Cosby's line in his stand-up comedy a number of years ago, which was, I can't remember how the lead-up, but the point was this song, be with the one you love, love the one you be with. Well, he be with lots of people, not at their discretion or at their willingness. And to me, I mean, it's a heinous thing. I don't care who it is, to force oneself upon another person. And there's just no excuse for that. But to me, the most revolting thing was this notion that, as you know, he just was hoping to revive his career. I think the old goatee's made enough money and what have you, just go home and knit. But he was trying to revive his career, and there was going to be a program devoted to him, I think a roast or something like that, on one of the stations, who has immediately, it was NBC, canceled it. But then, in preparation for that, there was already scheduled a news conference because also Mr. Huxtable, that's Freudian, Mr. Cosby and his wife have been very serious collectors of African American art, and that collection, which had always been private, very few people had seen it, even experts who I'm familiar with who are experts in African American art had not been privy to it. And it is to be shown at the National Museum of African American Art in Washington. And so that they were hoping to get some kudos from that. And unfortunately, for the institution, this is going to throw a bit of mud on that. But to me, the most awful thing, other than the crime, was the fact that almost like Queen Victoria or the present Queen, we are not amused. And Cosby was interviewed by someone, and they were asking questions, and he has, which has been the case, as I understand it from the news broadcasters, every time one of these accusations has come up during his career, I won't talk about that. I won't talk about that, etc. And then, so he kept saying that when the interviewer was very insistent. And then after they stopped, he said to the interviewer, something to the effect of, well, I hope you're not going to use that snippet where I'm saying, I won't talk about this, I won't talk about it. I mean, who the hell does he think he is? I mean, even the president wouldn't dare to say something like that, you know. Bill Cosby ain't Mr. Rogers. So enough with that. Don't watch, if it's up to me, don't watch reruns of the Cosby Show, etc. Oh, sad news to hear that, if we're talking about entertainers, that the great writer and director Mike Nichols passed away. And if one just thinks of, I mean, he made some funny and silly movies, but certainly the great movie, I think many of us who are a little bit older remember, his film version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was extraordinary. And I highly recommend you have On Demand or Netflix or one of those things. Take a look at it. It offers brilliant portrayals of the four characters by Virginia, what do you call it? Elizabeth Taylor. What was her husband's name? I can't think of his name. It was that awful. Call in and tell me. And then the young, I can't remember the other four actors' names. Isn't that funny? I'm getting Alzheimer's here. Anyway, but it's a great, great film. And it was the first film in which Elizabeth Taylor was portrayed herself, not as the beautiful woman, which she was even at that point when she was in a little advanced years, but as this monstrous harridan, which the character acquired. Amazing, 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 amazing film. So students of film, students of acting, do indeed turn it in because it's an extraordinary performance. But we will miss Mike Nichols, who both was a director on stage as well as film, and brought a number of very potent films that questioned the 20th century mores and how they were integrated or not into our society. Oh, I think it's rather interesting, too. That's a real dilemma that we can feel at home. You know, we think oftentimes these awful terrorist bombings that are happening in Gaza or in Iraq or in Pakistan or what have you. Well, now we can almost experience the same thing because it turns out that 10 million airbags in our cars can blow up and shoot shards of metal into our faces. So just think, you don't have to go to Gaza. You can just be on a Bigelow Boulevard, go through a pothole, and poof, all this stuff will come flying into your face. It's very interesting. I once hit a pothole some years ago driving on Smallman Street, and the airbag next to me, not my own, went off, and there was a poof. I felt like I was a Pillsbury Doughboy because all this white powder comes out. Luckily, no shards, or at least I didn't find any. But it just totally destroys your car, and $700 later as they stick it back into the bag. But this really is quite dangerous. And although they had limited, at first speak, the company who made these, a Japanese company, I think is the main producer of the bags we use in our American cars, not just in Japanese cars. Now it turns out it's, I don't know how many brands over how many years. So do indeed, if you look on the web, find out if your car, your make, and your specific year model needs it, and take it in, because you don't want to be sort of have shards of this, that, and the other goes slamming into your face. Oh, let's see what else. I think it's very, very, very interesting that two things are linked together, and some of you may find yourself in disagreement with me here, but they can't seem to keep it together at Penn State. As those of you who've listened to this program know, I'm not a great supporter of sport. I don't like sport. But, if you like it, fine, good. It's part of the American way of life. But Penn State, get over it. Get over your take your comeuppance and get on with it. It seems that the Board of Trustees has tried to weather this through. They rightly, at least in my opinion, accepted the Frere report of the lawyer who wrote this up for the ACLU. And now these alumni-based agitators who force some of themselves onto the board are just agitating. They want to put Joe Pa into the pantheon of heaven, back with his halo. Leave him where he is. Also, along with this, there was an interesting article in the New York Times. I'm trying to think, was this yesterday or today? Yesterday. And in it, it's all about sexual assault on campuses, because as we're finding more and more, and I think it's not uninteresting that what I began with, namely the case of Bill Cosby, we're now finding on campus. Oftentimes, and the reason I link it up to Penn State and the whole Sandusky thing is, in this case, although it was not perpetrated on children, we have often, not exclusively, to be fair, but often athletes who are involved in these abuse cases. And what we find too often times is, along with just the general pressure placed upon women not to come forth because they're going to be put up to all sorts of ridicule. They'll be seen forever as sluts, who it was their fault, because there aren't very many righteous rapes, as one of our government officials talked about a while ago. There are very few righteous rapes. The woman just simply didn't want to go where she started going, which is totally bogus. But oftentimes we find campuses absolutely being irresponsible not to follow along in these cases, basically to shun the women, and particularly when it's a sports figure who is bringing glory, in inverted commas, to their campuses, but more important than the glory, the money of various kinds of franchising. And of course, many of the sports lovers who spend inordinate amounts of money paying for stadia and coach salaries that are higher than the salaries of university officials, presidents, and provosts, they do not want to put these people, cover them with chagrin. There's a man who's a lawyer in Manhattan who has been looking into these practices, a man by the name of Andrew Miltenberg, and he's quoted as saying, "Most of the time I'm looking to seal the records or have this redacted upon graduation so it doesn't follow them along for the rest of their lives." And in both cases, is it following the women along for the rest of their lives? And very frequently it isn't. It is, but also for some of these sports people who, of course, we don't want to ruin their careers for one little mistake. As I recall, someone's commenting upon this, if not quite recently, but in one of the reports talking about this. Here's one quote. "Last month, 28 members of the Harvard Law School faculty published an op-ed criticizing Harvard's sexual misconduct policies for, and I quote, the absence of any adequate opportunity to discuss the facts charged and to confront witnesses and prevent a defense at an adversary hearing. end of quote, for exceeding the parameters of Title IX and for the failure to ensure adequate representation for the accused. Again, oh my God, the accused guy, but the women have to endure this. And endure not only the physical danger and humiliation, but then to be seen as bringing down. Very often in these cases, especially now due to social media, these women being traversed on the web with, you slut, you ruined our team, you brought down the quarterback or what have you. I mean, it's just reprehensible. I mean, sort of as a side bit to this, I think we may have talked about last week, or you certainly may have read in the press, this young fellow who was a bagger at Target, this young, attractive boy, and he was a bagger, a young 15-year-old kid, and some young girl saw him and took a picture of him and put it on the web, and immediately he had 500,000 followers, and he was on the Ellen Show, etc. He was a normal, sweet kid. With no specific talents other than bagging, as he said himself. But all of a sudden, he had death threats just because he was put on camera. Who do you think you are? We're going to take you down. I mean, death threats for being a bag boy, for Christ's sake. So I think, social media is such that we literally tear apart our victims. If it hasn't been enough that they've been raped, possibly impregnated, or also perhaps not only bruised and degraded, but also perhaps contracted sexually transmitted diseases, then their reputations are simply ripped asunder. Some of you may have known the case at Columbia, where this young woman brought a rape case involving herself, and Columbia just stalled, and she created, if I'm not mistaken, she was an art major, and she created a performance piece where she took a mattress, I don't know if it was the actual mattress upon which she was assaulted, and it was, Selena's telling me it was, and she carried it around, and maybe still is, I'm not sure if it's been concluded, carried it around campus and would plop it down. She'd go to her class and plop down the mattress, and she said, I am not stopping this performance until this person is kicked out of Columbia. And I believe at first they were going to suspend him and use some sort of silliness in order not to sort of blacken his name forever. Another lawyer in this case, Judith Grossman, who's a lawyer and a feminist, made this point of saying, she got involved in the cause when her son successfully fought an accusation of sexual misconduct. This stuff is breaking out all over like a bad case of acne, Ms. Grossman said. I think there is no question that there is an issue of sexual assaults in this country on campus and off campus, but this is not the first issue in our country where a bumper sticker approach has been applied to a nuanced problem. I mean, rape and nuance are two words that should not be put together. And I don't know what Ms. Grossman's son did, but I think that is a good bit of lawyer speak, if you will. So if anyone would have any comments on this, I would love to hear them, because I think it's a pressing issue. And it's coming out more and more and more. And I think, yes, there are certainly those cases we find where if something becomes hot, you have people adding on to the issue. But there was this one woman, Janet Dickinson, I think her name is, who was thought to be the first supermodel. She's a bit of a pain, having seen her a few times. However, she made the point of saying, and her alleged rape happened 27 years ago, but she, every time I come out, and I'm a much older woman now, etc., but this thing still sticks with me, and it was a horrible assault, and it's something I cannot shake off. This is someone who has her own her own public personality, and has made some wealth from some of her TV shows, and now I think she's a modeling agency head. But this thing sticks with these women, and in a funny way, it just struck me. We read about these cases of these young girls being raped in the Middle East, etc., and when that happens, their families kill them because they feel that they have brought these young girls who've been assaulted most oftentimes by men who could be their grandfathers. This has brought disgrace upon these young girls who try to run away or what have you. In a funny kind of way, in a first world way, we're doing the same thing with these young women who are being raped and assaulted in colleges. We're treating them that way, and sort of you brought this honor upon Columbia or Harvard or NYU or CMU or University of Pittsburgh. Let's see. Well, probably the big issue with us this morning is, of course, the president's comments of last night. I will say, first off, I didn't see the live broadcast, but certainly read all of the interesting comments about it this morning. I say, and of course, those of you who listen to this program know that I, along with our queen, Miss Cullen, sort of are on the side of the president. But I really feel very strongly, and I was very proud that the president came out and said, I'm the president, I'm going to do this. And what I loved was when he spoke and he sort of got rolling, taking this kind of call and response that one often hears in the African-American churches in this country. And finally, he ended up by saying, if you want to pass a law, I wouldn't have done this if you had not passed a law. As most of you know, the Senate had passed a law about immigration reform, and Mr. Boehner and others on the Republican side had stopped allowing this legislation to be adequately discussed and go forward. They had literally blocked it. And now for them to say, oh, what is the president doing? To me, what's very annoying about this, all right, there's disagreements. I'll even say maybe in some instances on the issue and others, there's some logic on their side, very little, but some logic. But what kills me this morning, and I'm not as wise a political thinker as Lynn Cullen is, but most of it has not come, at least from what I heard in NPR this morning and read in the newspapers, with point-by-point sort of redaction of what is wrong with the bill. It's sort of, we won. Why did he do that? How dare he do that? He can't do that. We won. And it sounds so goddamn childish. The president did what he did. And what's very interesting, I heard one commenter, I can't remember who it was, Republican, saying, oh, yeah, he tried to do that at the last minute by going to the Latino voters. Well, of course. I mean, this is an issue that is particularly pertinent to many people who are particularly Mexican in terms of people coming right over the border and some others from Central America. But the Republican Party is not speaking to that part of our aggregate community. And now, of course, there's a fear that in the next election, on the part of Republicans, that the Hispanic vote is going to come in preponderantly for whomever may be the next Democratic candidate for president. Well, then do something about it. If you feel that you have traduced and traversed against the Latino population, which you have, come in and speak and show that you are here for all Americans, not just for one slice of Americans. But expecting the president to bow down, and I think that's all we've heard since the last 2 weeks since the election is, we've won, and now we're winning. Ha, we're going to put the president in his place. Well, the president showed them, puh. And I think, as a number of the smarter commentators have said, if we look back to what the last 3 or 4 presidents have done in terms, including Mr. Reagan, in terms of immigration laws, etc., he's done nothing different than any of them done. And we can cheese pair about this law, Mr. Reagan, etc., but it's simply that cheese pairing. And, once again, this whole notion of who is an American, for Christ's sake, all of us, my grandparents, your grandparents, and whether this was in the 1880s or the 1980s, all came here from someplace else, even the goddamn Pilgrims. And for us to now take this up using all sorts of outlandish and outrageous comments about taking away our jobs, well, we've known, it's been proven time and time again, that the jobs that big business needs to sell their grapes, to sell their oranges, etc., needs people who sadly will work for minimum wage because perhaps they've been illegal. Big business bitches and other people will say, oh, these are taking away the jobs from Americans. Polls have shown time and time again Americans don't want and won't take these jobs. And we always needed new immigrants to come in and infuse our nation with new workers, with new cultures, with new aspects of how we can, should, and may run our country. And now to try to stop that, stop the floodgates, is absolutely ridiculous. So why don't we take a short break here, and then we will come back, and let's have some calls, people.
For the millions living with COPD, breathing becomes a real struggle. COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but you may have heard of it as chronic bronchitis or emphysema. Over time, it makes it harder and harder to breathe until you feel like you're breathing through a straw. COPD is the 4th leading cause of death in the U.S. It kills 1 person every 4 minutes, and it took my grandmother. An estimated 24 million Americans are affected, but as many as half of them don't even know it. It's a race against time to spread the word about this serious disease. If you're over 35 and have ever smoked, you could be at risk. The good news is, there are steps you can take to improve your symptoms. I'm Danica Patrick, and I drive for COPD. Take action today to breathe better tomorrow. Join the movement at driveforcopd.com, take our screening questionnaire today, and talk to your doctor.
BergBargains.com is your best bet for great deals in the Berg. Log on today for exclusive bargains to City Paper's Best of Pittsburgh 2014 winners, as well as discounted gift certificates to Pittsburgh Irish and Classical Theater, P.F. Chang's, and Wildwood Highlands. Pittsburgh's best bargains, BergBargains.com.
This is the sound of a flat-screen television hurled off a building. Now the new bike your kid wants. These are the things you could have, all cast into oblivion. Because when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have bought with it. Use Energy Star light bulbs and appliances, and you could save hundreds of dollars a year. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Download the popular CP Haps app and find out what's going on in Pittsburgh for the holidays. It's the fun and free app that puts the most popular events at your fingertips. Text events to 77948 to download now and register to win tickets to James Taylor at Consol Energy Center. The CP Haps app brought to you by Pittsburgh City Paper.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Well, we're back. We got a comment from Ansel Easton, who writing about Penn State. I would generally agree. I would generally tend to agree with you on the Penn State issue that you mentioned on today's show. However, the more recent activity on the topic is originating with PA lawmakers in the courts, not with the alumni grassroots group. What was originally a lawsuit by State Senator Jake Corman to challenge the $60 million sanction, that suit has been expanded by the judge to review the entire events that led up to the consent decree. This has had the effects of putting the NCAA on trial, and some very interesting facts have come to the surface, not the least of which is the apparent collusion between the NCAA and Louis Freeh, the latter of which was supposed to be conducting an independent report. Excuse me. I think it's worth seeing how this plays out. Let's see. We're having trouble with my mouse today. Let's see what happens. I had finger surgery yesterday, so I can't give people the finger or seem to press my mouse. Okay. I think it's worth seeing how this plays out. I would agree. I'm ready to move on, but recent events seem to suggest that something doesn't smell right. Okay. Now, I certainly did see some of this business about the NCAA and Louis Freeh. So, in a sense, if there is some wrongdoing, then I agree with Ansel. But I think a lot of this has simply to do with this sense of Happy Valley and creating this sense of a university that was more of a party school than anything else. But all right, I would agree. Let's read out to see what the facts may be. Let's see. Ray has written, if I can, Ray Martin, hold on. Oh, very good. Whoops. Sorry, Tom. Sorry to have missed Lynn's show. On the subject of campus assaults, this reminds me of the church and its own tribunal process. These are crimes. How do universities get away with creating their own judicial systems? Unions can't do it. Accounting firms can't do it. Butchers, bakers, candlestick makers all have to go to the police. Ray. Absolutely right. You know, it's very interesting. We all say in my world, the art world, that the art world is the last major unregulated industry, and that's why these large prices and insider buy-ins and buyouts, etc. There's just been a whole skullduggery going along at Sotheby's, the very famous British auction house that has now branches all over the world, and the man Mr. Ruprecht, who has been in charge of it, was forced out by Mr. Loeb, one of the big financial and hedge fund wizards, trying to get the prices up, etc. But I think university is the same. I mean, for years, I taught in academia for many, many years, and there's always the idea of the ivy-covered enclaves of academia and the notion of tenure, which meant not only and not primarily because you had taught and then published in a way that you had established your scholarly credentials, and the idea was that tenure was put in originally and ideally and idealistically to say, all right, Tom Sokolowski has proven himself to be a serious art historian, and if he chooses and wants to and should take up ideas, issues in his field that maybe will take down the famous glowing art historians or social historians or whomever expert in my field, and he can't be penalized for that. Because what academia is all about, the educational process is all about, is of ideas and about dispute and about debate. And now, however, we're finding the universities have taken this ways in sort of saying, as I say, we take care of our own. We do not allow the world to come in. Well, you know, many universities like my graduate alma mater, NYU, is a university that intermingles in a city, makes use of the city for the grammar and syntax of its educational system. And you put a lot of these issues to play in the world that's around you. So I think for universities to sort of have it both ways is a lot of baloney. And we're finding this has changed. And also we're finding this is going to be unfortunate for scholars of the future, because I think people of my age, probably if we have tenure or not, I certainly don't, we'll ride that through, and then the next place will be is in our graves or in an urn someplace ground up. But the idea of tenure probably is not going to continue. And unfortunately, it's not going to not continue for some of the reasons I've just been hinting at, but simply because universities can't afford to have people on staff who perhaps for the last 15 years of their lives are not very productive. I have a very dear, close friend who's probably one of the most productive scholars that I know and has published yards of books. But I remember when we celebrated his tenure, Edward said, "Oh my, I'm celebrating with all my friends tonight, and now I can watch TV and soap operas for the rest of my life." And in a way, he wasn't kidding, because there have been a number of instances, to go back a little bit, to rape and molestation on campus. Even for some of those activities, professors have been able to keep their tenure. Oh, just to make one silly, cheesy parenthesis, but connected to this. I hope some of you out there, Celine and I were just talking about this during the break, are viewers of that fabulous TV show, How to Get Away with Murder, which is about the law professor in an urban university with the extraordinary Viola Davis as the main character. But last night they had the stations, all the major stations, networks, are calling winter recess. So they stop for about a month and a half, and they do all the, Christmas Comes to El Dorado and crap like that, and play old Bing Crosby movies. Although he was supposed to be a nasty old bugger too. But anyway, does anyone know what the ending meant in last night's episode, I would love to hear. And I'll just leave it at that because of those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to give it away. But it really is a great story. If you're a lawyer, watch it, as lawyer friends of mine have said, having this willing suspension of disbelief because none of this could ever happen in real life in the courtroom in a law school environment. But the acting and the twists and turns, it's like Agatha Christie combined with Dial M for Murder. It's really great. The acting is superb. Viola Davis was the one who was in The Help, if you remember that great movie, as well as in Doubt. She played the African-American woman whose son was supposedly molested by a priest. But the acting is great, so it's really spellbinding. But if any of you have any thoughts about what the last scene, please let me know. One of the things that's been very interesting in the last week or so has been, and here I throw this at the feet of the media, is this impending drama around the situation in Ferguson. We've all been waiting, I guess. Well, let's put it that way. I'm sure most people have totally forgotten about it, which is on one level a bad thing, but a good thing on the level that this will happen. Presumably the grand jury is going to wisely agree to bring this case to trial. This is not to say that the policeman was right or wrong, but that there is certainly enough evidence to bring this to a trial. But all of it, I've seen this on television news, I've heard it on the radio, it seems already there was something in the Post-Gazette this morning saying Pittsburgh is ready in case Ferguson blows up. Because the notion is every African-American community has no self-respect, has no propriety. Everyone is going to riot in the streets, and that's ridiculous. However, everyone's expecting the long, hot summer of, what was that, 1974 or whatever it was, 1976. Whenever the long hot summer was. 1978 was one of those years. But again, too, in the New York Times today, Ferguson faces holiday shopping with unease. I mean, I think that's sort of an interesting headline. They're putting this impending rage on the part of the African-American community at what would be seen as a very improprietous thing to do, which is not to bring this case to trial, but saying, oh, isn't it a shame? The shopping, no one's going to want to go to Target or to T-Mobile or to whatever on Black Friday because the black community is going to be upset. I mean, really, it's demeaning. And it's literally adding fuel to the fire, getting everyone hepped up. Oh, my God, what's going to happen? Oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. Let's hope that everyone has been able to sit back, that wise leaders, particularly in Ferguson and in the St. Louis general metropolitan area, have been able to talk to the community, both white and black, both law enforcement as well as in churches, etc., to not allow this to turn into some sort of cabal. But again, we have to throw this at the head of our our newscasters to make everything into a horror show. That the news, instead of just being facts, has to become not even noteworthy, but cataclysmic. Nothing happens in our world that isn't cataclysmic. A fart becomes a torrent, if you will. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's see, where will we go from here? We're very, I think, pleased. The world should be very pleased to hear that it seems, although the deaths do continue to pile up in terms of Ebola in Africa, but it seems that the numbers of cases in Liberia are slowing down. And that is a very good thing. And maybe in that case, a bit of the hysteria has helped. However, I think, so much of what has happened. It's very funny. I went to have hand surgery yesterday. And I did this, as many people do. It was outpatient surgery and just with local anesthetic. And of course, one of the things after they asked me my blood pressure and they took my blood pressure and asked me some questions, and I had worked in this facility before, so I knew the nursing staff. And the nurse said to me, "Oh, we have one more piece, Tom." And I had to look over, read, and then sign the sheet, which is about whether I had traveled to Africa in the last month or so. And I said, "What? I'm in Warrendale, Pennsylvania." And I suppose, if it's just a couple of pieces of paper stapled together that Tom Sokolowski has to be bored about and then signed, it's not such a crazy thing. But on another level, you think, really? I thought this was being handled by people at the borders and at the airports, etc. But we seem to be moving forward on this, although it still is a very, very slow process, as we've learned, about getting the necessary virus, the chemicals used for the inoculations. Partly because, as we've all learned, that the pharmaceutical community were not interested because Ebola was not a problem that was infecting the first world, or what we used to call the first world. I don't know what we call the first world anymore, or maybe everyone's the first world. I don't know. And therefore, it wasn't financially viable, whereas drugs for all sorts of things like Botox and use of Botox, etc., just go up and up and up because we can afford it, and medical health programs pay for these kinds of craziness. We have unfortunately not been struck by the snow as many of our neighbors in Erie and Buffalo, just a couple of hours away, have been, extraordinarily affected by the snow. And now with the warm weather that seems to be coming just on Monday or Tuesday, I think here there's a suggestion of 63 degrees, which is absolutely lunatic. All that water is going to drain off. I remember we had a blizzard in New York in early January. I think it was something like the 4th of January. We had 4 feet of snow. I remember it was absolutely extraordinary. And then the next day, the temperature went up to 70, and it all drained down, and the subways were closed. I think it was the first time in New York history since the subway. And in fact, it had the same implications here in Pittsburgh because it was pretty much the same weather. And the Allegheny River froze. The Monongahela, maybe as well, I don't know. But I remember the Allegheny River froze because I was at that point in the negotiations to become the director of the Warhol Museum. This was in January of '96. And the river was so cold that when it got warm, these big ice flows were created, and water backed up, and the entire basement of the Andy Warhol Museum was inundated with water. We lost the whole basement, and it took a year plus to redo it. We had to, because the sewage came up, the sewers backed up, so let's hope that's not happening for Erie or Baltimore. One of the more distressing facts that came out was on the front page of today's paper. The headline, "Student Scores Declined After Funds Were Cut." The figure was, the sub-headline, districts had $850 million less than in the academic year 2010-2011. And it's really very sad because if one turns to the inside page, page A8, they show you that the PSSA, these statewide tests, from 2011 to 14, every single areas, math, grades 3 to 8, reading grades 3 to 8, and then they go categories such as all students, white students, black students, economically disadvantaged, English language learners, special education learners. Every single one of these has a downward arrow. And they go from the low of 3.6 for reading by white students to a high of, 13.2 to special education students and English language learners, English as a second language, if you will, for math. So that is really extraordinary. We really need to fix our education system in the urban areas. I think it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy, number one, that next to health care, and I don't even know if I'd say should health care, if we're going to prioritize one above the other, should be above education, because one is part and parcel of the other. But that in this country, the first country in the world, and I'm not saying that in a jingoistic way, our students, and particularly students who come from disadvantaged families, or perhaps single-parent families, or parents or families under a poverty level, those students who need the most tutelage, not just in terms of absolute teaching, but simply teaching manners and mores of behavior, of work ethic, of study ethic. And also, but not just that, but the idea that when they're in a schoolroom, they're in a quiet, safe, clean place where they can put all of the mess outside of the world for those 6 hours or whatever the timing is in their school day, and they can learn. They can, while being in that school, can receive a meal, because for some students, it's the only meal they get during the day, other than perhaps a slice of bread and a Coca-Cola for dinner. And it's tragic in this country that we allow our students. And also, the sad thing is, I was listening to Joe Klein, who on NPR yesterday. Joe Klein, as some of you may know, was the gentleman who for 8 years had been put in the position of Chancellor of Schools in the New York public school system. He was really quite wonderful. He had been put in that position by Mayor Bloomberg. And he said, the tragic thing about this, and he was commenting about this education dilemma all across the country, but particularly in New York, which he knew. And he said the best teachers, and teachers get scored for all sorts of things, the best teachers, and then they, of course, get the choice assignments, they get placed in the schools where they are least needed, where perhaps in those neighborhoods where there's more parental guidance and parents who are able and willing to sit down after school to help students with their homework, or take those students to after-school activities, which may be sporting events for to get their blood pumping, etc., or they may be music lessons, etc. And in the worst schools, we have the teachers who are young and wet behind the ears, or we have teachers who are frightened off by some of the physical violence that takes place, not only just bullying the students, but bullying of teachers. I have a number of friends who've talked about, when report cards come, they take the bus to school or a taxi or park 7 blocks from school because they know their tires will be, stabbed in because students are angry. Two, in some cases, parents who don't even care and never see the card. Those are the schools that need the best teachers. And we found certainly in projects like Mr. Canada's program in New York, in the neighborhood of Harlem, where he's proven that when good teachers are put in schools and in neighborhoods that are troublesome and problematic, in places where many, many families under the poverty line, those children's scores just go up. Not just the scores. I mean, that's one way we measure things, and that's one of the problems of the systems. That's another discussion. But when these kids are given the time and they're focused upon, etc., they enjoy learning. And here in Pittsburgh, we have the Pittsburgh Promise, and we've seen already what remarkable things that has done to allow students to stay in school. I think this year they will graduate, students who have gotten the Pittsburgh Promise and gone through 4 years of college, maintaining, I think it's a B- average, I can't remember what it is, have stayed in. We're going to graduate kids who, because of the Pittsburgh Promise, will have a college degree. We see that it isn't the kids themselves, that with the right kind of guidance, the right kind of kindness, the right kind of knowing when the child needs more work, maybe needs a rougher, and I don't mean by that physical treatment, to get them in line to read and study, that it works. And you hate to think that of our youngest people, the future of America, we are giving them we can't give them a good life. We at least hopefully could give them a lifeline, and we're not doing that. We're not doing that at all. So I think that is really one of the great tragedies of the present moment. So if we stop worrying about Joe Pa, and we stop worrying about whether the president was naughty or was being too much of a bully, let's learn at closer to home. Let's learn in our schools. If we have extra time, let's go in perhaps to be a tutor. And I know a number of people who've gone to do that, who've been retired, and some of them who are retired teachers. And they have found it to be a wonderful, rewarding experience. So if you have that time, if you have particularly some skills of working with children, why not donate that time? Because that's what these kids need. And there are many of these Big Brother programs and Big Sister programs, and more they're being created day after day. You know, it's interesting, a number of places we hear of Bill Gates and a number of people from Google and people from Amazon giving 100 computers to kids. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, computers are now becoming such that it's like having a dictionary. You can't go through life or a telephone without a computer. But the computers aren't any good unless they are used with someone to guide the students, not just to send selfies or look at cartoons or look at pornography or what else you can find on computers, but use them as a tool to learn. That it's no different than what the old slate and piece of chalk used to be many years ago, certainly not during my schooling days. Then it was a pencil and paper, and then it was a typewriter, and now it's a computer. But that's only good if you have someone watching out, being the guardian angel, standing over the shoulder of that student, guiding them along the way. Because like all of us remember at some point of our lives, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a parent first off, or another member of the family, whether it was a teacher, yes, maybe when it was a coach, who sort of put us on the right track, told us that we could learn, we could succeed, we are important, we are valuable, and we remember that for the rest of our lives. So certainly I know I have. Well, with that, I'm going to sign off and say, la-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Lynn will be back on Monday. And because of the Thanksgiving holiday, I'm going to join Lynn on Wednesday. So you'll have me to kick around with Wednesday, and Lynn and I can maybe sing for you again, as we are wont to do, and probably most of you are loath to hear us do that. But have a nice weekend. Sparkle or light up or glisten or whatever you want to do tomorrow night. And have a nice weekend. Stay warm, and we'll see you very soon.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.